last week's fantasy star at this position, George Kittle, $6,900. That's a $1,000 increase from last week. He went north of 42 fantasy points. That was 18.5 points higher than his previous best game. So at 6.9 against the Bengals, is Kittle's price too high?
No, it's not. And if you paid down at tight end last week, you lost. You had to pay up for Kittle when he has these explosive games, and he can do it. And so based on his upside, his price is never really going to be too low. We saw him explode last week. You had to have him. We've seen this a couple times in previous seasons where he absolutely demolishes the slate. And this could definitely be another week. If Samuel's in or even if he is out, doesn't matter. Kittle is their number one guy. You watched that play last week where he's tiptoeing down the sideline. He's wide receiver number one. He's the main target on this team, and he's priced like an expensive tight end as opposed to a really good wide receiver in a really good position with a lot of expected volume. And even if he has an average game, it's still not going to kill you. I don't know if I will go there. I always pay down at tight end, but based on his ceiling, it's too low.
Matty, how much of this is recency bias? How much of this is the matchup?
I think it's closer to recency bias, and I think it's really the Deebo Samuel didn't play last week bias. And this is really tough because Deebo has turned into more of a running back in recent weeks. And it's just kind of hard to know if that hamstring injury that's kept him out, like what that's going to do for his role. But I think that's only one of two reasons to not like Kittle as much this week. This game also is going to have pretty bad weather, and I just don't think it's as good of a passing environment as maybe people are expecting. And it's just like, it's a high price now, and I don't think that Kittle is a secret. Like, he just had this monster game. He definitely could have another big game, but Deebo just being there, whether he's getting more carries and maybe the Niners just run the ball more because they have this wide receiver / running back gadget player who's like just legitimately amazing at everything he seems to do. And then Deebo could catch more passes and Kittle gets less targets that way. So I think if Kittle were contrarian again, I would like it. But there's a lot of good tight ends, and I think Deebo coming back hurts him a little bit.
All right, Reid T. Fowler, even if Deebo Samuel, is back, he's not likely to be ready to contribute his typical load, right?
Yeah, and look, Eli Mitchell is banged up. It seems like Eli Mitchell is banged up every single week, right? He's got a concussion, he's got a knee thing, and like I think that matters because Shanahan wants to give him, 27 carries. And look, I think Deebo in or out, I think it does actually make a difference, right? Because we've seen Kittle get two games this year with double-digit targets. First game, they didn't really do that well, but second game, he did, obviously extremely well, 2 touchdowns. The bad thing about Kittle is he's so good, right? That sounds weird. He's such a good tight end. He's a really good run blocker. If what Matt is saying is true and they get out and they just want to run the ball, they're not going to put Kittle out and run him, in massive routes and give him 12 targets because he's so good in the run game, and he'll do that, right? He doesn't need those 12 targets. I would want to pay down, so just by proxy of that, I think it's too high. But to what Pearce was saying, man, this guy is an absolute monster. And if you take a look at him compared to other receivers, he's a guy that's priced potentially too low. And that's what we have to do with guys like Waller, Kelsey, and Kittle. Is these guys are just really big receivers, and if that's the case, then yeah, I think it's a little bit too low.